Greetings and salutations. I hope everyone is doing well today. Welcome to today's upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and I definitely do appreciate them. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? So today's upload is courtesy of a subscriber named Grady and his father. It occurred on a little chunk of land, a little peninsula in Virginia. A lot of the locals, I guess, in the north or southern part of it refer to it as Northampton Peninsula. It is full of these unincorporated little towns, just these little communities. Brayford, Franktown, Stewart's Landing, Kendall Grove is just a few. And then it ends, the peninsula ends with Cape Charles. And right opposite of Cape Charles is Mockhorn Wildlife Management Area. So I had ended up speaking with them. Now, Grady is a subscriber of the channel and had grown up listening to his father's experience. Now, Grady's dad wishes to remain anonymous because he still lives in the area and is a predominant figure in the area. He's fairly well known to the people of Northampton, with permission to share that. You know, I've shared information, and it's always strikes me as interesting because I'll say, you know, this person wishes to remain anonymous, but I have certain permissions of what to share. There's a certain guideline that people share with me that they will give me the ability to say, and other things I can't. I respect anonymity, and I will never let somebody become a target for whoever, mainly our government. So Grady grew up hearing about his dad's encounter all his life. His dad's encounter happened in 1972. And Grady no longer lives there. He has actually had he's had a Bigfoot experience up in North Carolina. But this is with Dogman. Now, after all of this, I talked to Grady's dad. And it's interesting because the things that he learned back in 72 and prior to that were things that I've talked about on the channel before, an area that I've talked about on the channel before. And his parents knew about this. His grandparents knew about this. So Grady's great-grandparents. So you've got this really small peninsula, and it's isolated. essentially it is an isolated chunk of land. You've got obviously water on both sides of you, but there's a bay. Newport News is to the left of Cape Charles. That's an interesting piece of geography, which we'll get into after I share his experience. So, 1972, Grady's dad had grown up, much like Grady, hearing about these creatures that roam the woods of Virginia, the Appalachia, all throughout the East Coast woodlands. Except his grandmother, so Grady's great-grandmother, used to call them human wolves because they were bipedal, they looked like wolves, they had, much like Luke's family down in Taylor, Mississippi, walking wolves. But they just referred to them as human wolves. And which makes a lot of sense because they have a very strong characteristic of a human and a wolf. Now, there would be times of the year where Grady's father was not allowed to hang out with his family or friends and family outside of a certain time of night. Pretty much in these little unincorporated communities back in the 60s, 70s, there was a time that these things were running wild throughout the small woodland areas throughout. It's now grown up, obviously. The area has flourished and become much larger than it was back then. There was just a lot of woods. You know, you've got ocean, saltwater bay on one side, ocean on the other. And you are in this almost like that whole peninsula would have been a wildlife preserve back in the day, you know? So they were warned, hey, you know, during this period of time, we don't go out after dark. And if you do, you know, make sure that you have a friend, more friends, you know, a couple friends, a firearm. And it was just kind of like known. You don't go out during spring or fall. For some reason, the summers were a little less, there was a little less experiences, sightings of them. Winter as well. But come spring and fall is when these creatures would kind of show up. Now, I had gotten to think about this while we were talking, and I just think it's important to share why. Because they would come to this area from across the bay over in Newport. North of Newport is a military installation, CIA installation, where underneath the farm would be what Victor called the breeding program, where these dogmen, werewolves, back in the 50s when they were experimenting with it, Bigfoot, were housed, bred, and chipped. They were never genetically created. They were captured by the government and chipped and used as weapons of war and or intimidation against the American populace. Why they would come onto this peninsula and they would come from Newport, the Newport area, cross over because it's less, much more narrow there, would be, it's an isolated area. spring and fall, breeding time, breeding and birthing time. There had been, apparently in the early 80s, there was dens found all throughout this area. And sometime in the late 80s, and Grady's dad remembers this vividly. Grady was a child at the time. The military came down from that military installation just outside of Newport, crossed over, and eradicated some of these dens. And this was all kind of just common knowledge to the people. Now, I found that interesting because throughout the years of interviewing different people and talking to different people, communities have known about these things. Tazewell, Virginia. If you talk to an old-timer in Tazewell, they will tell you dogmen are abundant. Mercer County, West Virginia, abundant. And it was just, natural common knowledge. Dinner table talk. You're not going to hear it at a diner, where outsiders would be, but you'll hear it inside their home. So these creatures would come and breed because they were safe. It was a safe place for them to be. Because one, you had water on both sides. You had less people. A lot of woods at one point. But then as the population started growing, well, it's that whole man versus nature thing. Or man versus creature thing. These creatures have been doing this for who knows how long. We don't know. I 100% believe the cynocephalin or cynocephalae or however you want to pronounce leave the N or just the A, are dogmen. They are modern day dogmen. And I've proven it in a video because these creatures had been talked about throughout the millennia in thousands of years, whatever you want to just say, like India had mountains and these creatures flourished there. Eventually humans got just, we did what we do best. Bottom line, we traded with them, we saw a weakness, and we tried to eradicate them. We tried to take care of them. We tried to just get as much as we could from them and not care. And what happened is they cut off ties with humans and moved deeper into the mountains, deeper into the woods, jungles, wherever. But the thing is these creatures at one point were peaceful. They lived amongst man. So who knows how long these creatures in Virginia had been doing this for? They may have looked at this like this is our area where we procreate, give birth, and once spring comes, we're out. Or it's just the continuous cycle. 1972, Grady's dad and a few of his friends decided that, hey, it's end of spring. We should be okay. They were in their late teens at the time. And they had just doing what kids do. They had gotten some beers. And they proceeded to just go out and drink some beers. Parks, sit at a park that they used to hang out at, which is no longer there. there's a lot of the landscape that was there that is not anymore, because of the growth. There was tracts of woods that they hung out at that are no longer there, that are now like 6 or 7 houses and half-acre property. So they're just relaxing, hanging out, drinking beers, and they start to talk about the human wolves. And he distinctly remembers having these conversations because they were like, one of the kids was a little leery about going out. And he had said, maybe we shouldn't be going too far out, too far to the east in that set of woods, because his family had heard about these things, knew that there were dens out there and such, but they kind of all agreed, it's almost summer. It's, we're good, we're safe. Not thinking like, just because it's almost summer, these things are still there. They're just less in population, so they're hanging out, and they are a ways away from their home. What they had done was they had a buddy go up into mainland, north of Northampton County, and pick up some beers and drop them off. And what they were going to do is they were just going to put the beers in their bags and just kind of walk and hang out and drink beer and walk home. Just a random kind of nothing else to do in a small town. Anybody that grew up in a small town knows you do some really dumb shit. Like we did some dumb shit up in the Adirondacks growing up here. Nothing to do at times, and so you just make things to do, and they are dumb. So they decide that we're going to just walk from pretty much the border of Northampton County and walk down to where they live, just above Cape Charles, which is a haul. Not too long, but a haul. And there was some old dirt roads that they were gonna walk on. But there's some times that they'd have to go on a couple of main roads. So they would just be really careful. Because even though they're unincorporated communities, there's still law enforcement patrolling the areas. Not in abundance, but there's always law enforcement. And like I said, there was one of the guys that Grady's dad was with, had been thinking more and more about, they kind of never had done this. They are all older now. This is kind of like something they had never even remotely thought about doing. And of course, you have one person who is a little more fearful than the others. That's going to go one of two ways. One, the fear is going to spread. Or two, the other group members are going to ensure that one person that, hey, it's okay. We're all good. We've got some weapons with us. We got some beers. We're good. It's almost summer. And it didn't work that way. The fear worked. And throughout these dirt roads, kind of pathways, there's two sets of people that live on this little land here. One, there's the locals that are there year-round, which isn't a lot of people. Even now, I guess, these small incorporated towns are not very big. There are not a lot of people there. But during summertime, you've got the people that have property there, either their family-owned property and passed it down. So kind of like summer people. And living in the Adirondacks, living in a vacation area, Lake George, New York, we have a lot of summer people. So I know exactly what they were talking about. And they're walking through some of these roadways and pathways that there's no lights on for a distance, a couple miles. And then you've got a house that's lit up. Front light on, porch light on, 2 houses down further, nothing. They get to this one little park that they were going to hang out in. And that was like the plan. They were going to sit there and drink a couple beers. And then continue to do their walk. They had sat down, and there was these old kind of metal picnic tables. They were cemented into the ground, but they turned. I've never heard of anything like this. They actually turned. So if you could fit more people sitting different ways, I guess. I don't know. I've never heard of. And there was the old kind of charcoal barbecue grills that were metal, raised up on a pole next to these picnic areas. They're just sitting there, and one of the kids starts a fire in this kind of barbecue grill. Hibachi. That's what I couldn't think of. The whole night we were talking, and we could not think of the name they were called. Hibachis. So he had put some kindling in and started a little fire. They're all talking, hanging out. And what happens when people are a little afraid, a little leery? They see some shadows, and instantly the fear kicks in. They start to run. They saw what they immediately assumed. None of them had seen any of these dogmen, or what they called human wolves. Their family members may have. He thinks that one of the kids that they were hanging out with may have with a parent driving one time, but he doesn't know if he was telling the truth or not. But they see some shadows off in the distance, and it was just a trick of your eye, because they started to run and nothing happened. They kind of laugh it off, haha. And they walk back to the picnic table area where they had this little grill and a little fire going in it. Not a big fire, obviously. And one of the kids starts to put more sticks on it. And it's not huge, but it's enough to have some light and not draw a lot of attention to them either. And they're laughing it off about how, haha, these shadows, da da da. They're getting more intoxicated as well. And all of a sudden, probably 15 minutes into them in their return, they hear sticks and branches breaking in the woods to the opposite side of them, the area that they had just came from. Not where they ran to, but from the north coming into south. So where they had walked from initially. Instantly they go dead silent, and they start to whisper amongst themselves, looking behind them. And because of that first panic, they kind of sit there and, maybe it's that messing with us again, maybe it's us and our imaginations. So they put the little fire out, put some beer on it, put some dirt on it, just to have it out so they could actually see in the dark now. And sure enough, they keep hearing almost and it wasn't walking at this point. They had heard walking, but it wasn't It was more or less if someone was standing in the woods, a person would be standing in the woods and for a long period of time watching somebody. And they kind of getting bored and moving, just like moving about just ever so subtly. But still, it's going to make noise, right? And they now have turned the table, so they're all sitting on one side looking at this area. And they see this like blink. 2 blinks. And they're like, what the hell? And they realize that they're like, those are kind of like a orange colored, not red and not like not a yellowish orange, but a really weird looking orange. And the eyes blinked together. So it was like kind of almost like how humans do. Blink, both go dead, black, and then boop, there they are again. And they're whispering amongst themselves going, what the hell is that? What is that? And they keep hearing the ever so subtle twigs break. And one of the kids, who I guess had gotten picked on a lot, but still in that friend group, just took it upon himself to wing a beer bottle out into the woods at whatever was out there. They hear that twirl of a glass bottle going through the air. It's catching wind, that whistle. And they hear a thunk, and they knew it hit a tree. They instantly knew it hit a tree. You can hear it when a bottle hits wood. It makes it's a very distinct noise. And then they hear it hit the ground. And they kind of laugh. They're like laughing at that because the eyes did not move. Now, they are not 100% that it's eyes, especially now, because they're under the thinking that just like a person, if you throw a bottle at somebody and they're standing there and it remotely comes close to them, they're going to make themselves known. They're going to, do something, either run away, run towards you, but it does nothing. It's there. And they're laughing, ha ha ha. And all of a sudden, it's just this huge, loud growl that starts, and it turns into a roar. And the best way Grady's dad explained it would be like, it sounded like it came from the pit of this creature's stomach. It was this growl, and it just carried on, and then it turned into a roar, like it was a eruption. And they all jumped back, and they didn't give it a chance to charge. They just started running. They're running, putting their packs on. A few of them got their beer bottles still in their hands, and they're hauling ass out of there as fast as they can. They know they're not going to be able to beat these things because they've heard of how fast they are. Their idea is if we can get to a porch, a house, even if there's no one there, if we can just get to it, maybe they'll leave us alone. Now, I'll share this after. Because his dad had heard this one experience. And after his dad heard, Grady had saved this video, this upload that I had done. And after his dad heard it was when Grady's dad said, yeah, if you can get a hold of him, I'd love to share my experience. So that's their decision. If we can get by a house, we have, like a human, they're not going to charge us. They're going to be afraid that more people are going to come out, right? That's wrong. Because now they are hauling ass and they can hear this thing running along the wood line. It has not stepped foot out of the woods. So, what is it, 40 something years now? 50 years. Obviously, it's grown up. So, like, if it was now, this thing would have to go on to some sort of main road, some sort of yard. But at this point in time, 53 years ago, it's going to be running through the woods because that's all that's there is woods and some paths, dirt paths, roads, summer roads, for where there is nothing but summer people in some of these parts. And then you've got, obviously, macadammed roads. They get to a house and they are all like out of breath. One of the kids starts pounding on the screen door because it's locked. They can't open it to get onto the porch. And no one's coming out. There's not a car there. They realize this is not anyone's home that they know. It's a summer house. And they see these lights, these eyes coming through the woods. Very similar to, I know that feeling. Because in 1994, when I saw those lights, those eyes lights, this is the best way to describe it because they are so recognizable when you see these. When you see an eye shine that has it's self-illuminating, it isn't as bright as a flashlight. But there is definitely a unique brightness to it. They see that and they kind of just instinctively keep running. They get to the next house, which is about a half a mile. And they know now where they are. They know that if they can get over about a couple of dirt paths and another kind of park area, they would be onto a macadammed road and they would be in an area, one of these unincorporated towns that I had mentioned. And they knew that this is where there would be a better chance of running to someone's house, that there would be someone there. So they get there and they realize when they keep running, they're like, oh shit, we're missing, this person. Where do you think they are? They finally get to a macadammed road, and Grady's dad says it started out with 5 of us. When we hit that macadammed road, there was 3 of us. He's like, we didn't know where our friends were at this point. We just knew that we were safe. We're turning and looking to see if they're still, maybe they fell. But there was never any indication that one of their friends ran the other way or one had fallen, because if they had heard one of their friends fall, they would have stopped. They were close, very close together, grew up together. They get to the macadammed road off of a dirt road, and they are looking down this long stretch of road, they look back to the south, and there's no stoplights in this area. There's stop signs. And they see there's no houses, lights lit up, except there's a sign that's lit up, and it's not too far away, but far enough away. And they immediately recognize it as that's one of the churches. Let's get there. There's light. So the three of them just take off dead sprint to this church. And they obviously now they are on a main road. There's still woods all around them. Once they got off of that dirt road, they couldn't realize how far they had run. But when they hit the church and they're standing by the sign, they realize that, now it's more of a realization that two of their friends are gone. But we haven't seen those eyes or that eye shine in quite a distance. We hit 3 paths, 3 dirt roads, and then came out onto the main road. But it's been almost since that house deeper into the woods. And when I say deeper into the woods, it's not like Deliverance Woods. This is just much different than it is now. But it's a narrow peninsula. I'm trying to explain this the best way. It's woods, but it's not like deep Appalachia. But it's enough to where, and especially at this time back then, there's obviously, like I said, a lot more woods. They're like, we have not seen that, but one, how do we know it's one of these human wolves chasing us? Maybe it's someone messing with us. Maybe it's, what's his name's older brother, the one that picked up our beer. Maybe it's him and one of his buddies just fucking around with us. Maybe that's where the other two are. And so they're kind of talking about it. They being as optimistic as possible, like coming up with just scenarios like, yeah, that's got to be it, because we didn't, we heard that growl and that howl, but couldn't someone make that, And then they're like, that couldn't be made. But we haven't seen it we've just seen the eye shine. And they're really teetering of like, is it real? Is it not? Is someone messing with us? And they're kind of just at each other's odds right now. Grady's dad looks down the road. For some reason, he just happened to turn his head. And what he sees canceled everything that they were just arguing about. Stepping out of the woods into practically the middle of the road with 3 steps was a human wolf, a Dogman. And judging from the distance they were to where it was, this thing is easily 7 feet in height. Easily bigger than the biggest, football player they'd ever seen in real life. Just a monster of a creature. And it's staring directly at them. They're in an open kind of small parking lot next to a sign, lit up, not super lit up, but those lights that are on the ground that shine up to the sign so you can read Jesus saves. They are staring at a dogman that's staring at them. And they're terrified. One of the kids says, churches don't lock their doors, so let's get into church. It won't follow us in the church. And they run up the stairs, and sure enough, the doors weren't locked. They open the door and they run in, and they run through the church to the other side. There's 2 doors. He remembers distinctly. He said there's 2 doors off to each side, vaulted ceilings, a very small church. There was a basement for dinners and stuff, but upstairs was just the church, like a congregational hall would be in the basement. And they run to the furthest door away from the main door, and they're all just standing there, like kind of ducked down, staring right at that, being as quiet as possible, and whispering to each other like it's not going to come in the church. It won't come in the church. All of a sudden they hear like a huge thud against the wall of the church. And they jump because it's the wall that they're standing at. And they look at each other and they're like, how did it know that we were right here? And they hear scratching on the wall, the outside wall. And they're looking at each other and they look at the door on the other side of the building, which would bring them back out to the main road, because that ran alongside the main road. This door would have brought them to a trek of woods, like a backyard area for the church, and then woods. But if they went out that door, it would bring them to the main road. They could continue to run. All of a sudden, everything that they did not expect happened. They hear this just loud kind of thud noise, and the door of the church, the front door of the church, just drops and hits the ground. That's the thud they hear. And what steps into the church, Grady's dad said he's seen movies. We've all seen the movies where you see a demon and it just walks wherever it's walking. It has this like supernatural, very powerful aura to it. This thing walked into that church and stood there staring directly at us. And it tipped its head back and it howled inside of a church. And all bets were off at that point. They were like, we got to run out this door right here. That must be the thing that they push the door open, and what they see right there is another dogman staring right at them. So they turn back to see if that one had come closer, and it's now on all fours and kind of just sits down and looks at him. And he said it was the biggest dog. And he said the weirdest part about it, thinking back years later, and I thought, Grady's dad said this, he goes, and I thought even months after this experience, he said, I'll never forget what happened. He said, but when that thing sat down, what I could see of it was probably the most beautiful looking dog, but just huge. The way it sat, and its chest was puffed out, and just nothing about this creature screamed weakness. And they just decide to, as they see it sit, they run to the other door where the road is. They hit that door, boom, they're through it. They get out into this little parking area and jump onto the road and start running down the road as fast as they can. Periodically turning over their shoulders to see if one of the two was going to chase them down. They instantly see both of them side by side along the wood line, not in the wood line, but along the wood line, side by side. And you could tell which one would have been the alpha because he was much bigger than the other one, but that one was still even bigger than a human. And they're just running alongside the wood line, almost playfully hunting, slowly running. They see a set of lights in the distance, and they instantly knew it was a car. High beams are on, and they stand in the middle of the road, flagging down the car, just in hopes of whoever this is going to pick up 3 adolescent teenagers in the middle of the night, stinking like beer, and saying, there's Dogman chasing us. He said, this car gets maybe 50 feet from us and we realize it's a police cruiser. And as it's coming at us, the police officer must have seen these creatures because he immediately flicks on the lights, but he's got his spotlight dead aimed at these 2 dogmen running along the side of the wood line. And he jumps out of the car. As that spotlight hit the 2 dogmen, they veered into the woods. He gets out of the car and walks over to them both, walks over to the 3 kids. And he said, what the hell's going on? What's that? What are you doing out here? Why do you smell like beer? Get in the car. What, confused. They start rambling. Our 2 friends are out there. Those things just broke through the church. The second they said that, he put them in that car and pulled into the church's parking lot. Uses the radio to radio whoever. Got 3 in custody, breaking and entering at this church, this and that. Some good damage. We'll need backup. They are looking at this and saying, we didn't do that. We didn't do this. Like, that's a door that's 2-3 inches thick. And it's laying in the middle of this, in the church aisle. And he gets out of the car and he walks into the church, leaving those 3 in a locked police cruiser. They can't get out. They can't defend themselves. The police officer comes running out of the church, jumps into the cruiser, and like I said, he was on the radio prior. He's radioing now. Heading to this direction. Meet me here. We've got an issue. And Grady's dad vaguely remembers them saying something about a government. We need to get those government guys in here now. Like, they have now crossed a line. Meaning, the dogmen have done, Grady's dad believes that law enforcement, as well as anybody else that grew up on this piece of land here, like his grandparents, Grady's great-grandparents, his mom and dad, the government has been involved with keeping these things suppressed. They are brought to a undisclosed police station. He's not sharing where it was exactly. That's why I just listed the couple of those in unincorporated areas, because in one of those is where they were. They are brought there. They are all upset, still wondering where our friends are. This, and that. Parents are called. Parents are asked, hey, we're going to get in touch with you guys. We got 2 missing kids, but we also have an issue. There was some vandalism. And this is what they're saying to the parents. They're not saying what literally happened in reality, but they did some vandalization to a church when that cop saw it. And Grady's dad distinctly remembers hearing. The kids go home with their parents. Parents trickle in, 3 sets trickle in. Grady's dad goes home with his mom and dad, and I guess on the way to their house, the mother says something along the lines with, "Now you know they're real." And I really hope that whatever happens doesn't land on this family or any of your friends at that matter. And he tells, he's like, we didn't see where X and Y went. We have no idea where our friends are. Next afternoon, they are called in. Those 3 sets of family are called to the police station. And there are 2 government-looking officials. They are brought into a room without their parents. One was talking to the parents, and the one was talking to the 3 kids. They bring up the friends, and they say, the agent guy, whatever, he says, your friends are safe, your friends are alive. They hid, but we've already talked to them. Now they know that their friends are okay. They spill the beans on what happened, this, and that about the church. And little wind. They are told, essentially, that they're responsible for the vandalization of the church, and they will have to pay for it. So they get home. Parents, Grady's dad's parents, are not yelling at him. He's confused about that. He's like, I was so confused that, my parents weren't screaming at me. Grady's dad's he's about 10 years older than me. So I can relate. My parents would have reamed me out, even if it wasn't my fault. They would just ream me out because police were involved in something, Eventually, a day or 2 later, they end up meeting up with their friends. So, boom, there's the 5 together again, and they find out what happened to their friends that night. Apparently, one of them had taken off running. Well, they all ran one way. One of them had been standing, and he was stuck staring at the eye shine. Well, when they took off running, he felt a tug on his arm, and he thought that it was one of the human wolves after him, but it was one of the friends that took off running. And he said, "Come with me, come with me." And he pulled him under the porch that door that they couldn't open. And there's a lattice along the porch. So they're laying in dirt, looking out onto a small yard in a dirt road, and they see this Dogman run right by them. I don't know why I just got chills, but Jesus, that's scary. And it runs right just down the road, right after their friends. They're laying there watching it. And no more than 20, 30 seconds later, there's two more run directly after that first one. That's when they decide that they are just going to lay there until daybreak. And they'll come out. Hopefully their friends made it. So both parties are thinking, my friends didn't make it. They thought, as they're laying under this porch safe, but scared, that their friends didn't make it. Grady's dad and his friends are like, our friends didn't make it either. Like, geez, them. So, long story short, they were responsible for the repair of the church. There was no charges brought up, but to cover everyone's ass in the communities, they were instructed to, compensate the church for the damaged doors and any other damage that was done. Fix whatever you guys broke. And for the rest of the summer, that's what they did. All 5 of them. And that's all they talked about was those dogmen chasing them. At the end of summer, early fall, Grady's dad says it was weird because probably right at the end of summer, it was still warm. It was an Indian summer that we had what looked to be a National Guard unit, a small unit come in and go into the woods. For what? They didn't know. Years later, 17 years later, is when he realizes, that's who they had burn and eradicate the dens that had been found. They'd, set them on fire and stuff. He doesn't know if there was any dogmen in them or any, smaller dogmen, whatever, in these dens, but they were burned, buried, taken care of, eradicated. He believes that 17 years earlier, that's the same thing that those National Guard troop did, or unit did, was go in and exterminate everything in the woods that was not a natural creature to those woods, meaning just dogmen. So that was his experience, and he had shared that with Grady all his life. The experience that Grady shared with him that had him want to talk to me was there was a Virginia mining community. And in this little community, there was a row of 10 houses. and then in front of it, a row of 10 houses, and so on. And this guy came to work for the mine. And he noticed, like, one, no one did anything after dark. Two, there was what appeared to be damage on the walls of these houses. And they weren't big houses. They weren't nice houses. These were just like throw together 1 or 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen house. You know, just more like a camp. So he's like, what the hell? You know, this is weird. And no one would say anything to him about anything. Until one night, as he worked there for a month or so, he decides to sit on his porch at night and drink some beers. Realizing, now that whole month, he realized no one is out of their house past dark. No one. Not even sitting on their porches. And what he sees one night is, sure as shit, dark comes, keeps getting darker later, and dogmen come into this little row of houses from the back holler. So he's sitting in the front of the building. He's sitting in front of his camp, looking at another house across this road. And behind his house is this just holler. The only other word that he said, you know, and they came out of that way. And they specifically went to one house. He ran inside when he saw them. Thank God, he said, thank God my porch door was locked, but they could have ripped that porch right off. They could have ripped the whole building apart if they wanted to. But they didn't. But they went for that one house, this one house in the middle. And there was more scratches and more damage done to this house than any of the ones in this community or mining camp area. And no one knew why. No one would say why. But he had heard that experience, and Grady's dad said, that sounds real familiar to where, you know, what happened to me as a kid, minus a mining community. We are in like a local vacation people community. Summer people, vacation summer people, and the local residents. Very similar. Isolated area. And he said, I will share my experience with him. So, thank you for sharing your experience with me. Now, the Newport thing, Grady's grandmother, or Grady's great-grandparents, Grady's dad's parents, or grandparents, his grandmother kept talking about how there was times that these creatures had been seen coming from the Newport area, the Newport News area. And military, the CIA had a training area just north of it. And they speculated, do you think these things came from there? Because in that area, there's water on one side and woods and a little bit of swamp on the other. It's very strange. But that's where Victor told me, that the breeding program was in the CIA farm installation base there. Deep underground base designed for breeding program, which not genetically altered, not experiments. The only thing they did was male and female dogman, male and female werewolf, procreate pups, chip them, and break them to where they will be a soldier or some sort of weapon. Now, a long time ago, I would have been like, before I met Victor, I'd been like, that's real far-fetched. I don't buy that. And I can't blame anybody for not believing, like, when Victor came and shared that stuff, because it didn't make any sense to me. But throughout the years, and now knowing like how the government had created super soldiers by just easily manipulating and this and that, there are super soldiers that don't have superpowers. That's not so. These are soldiers that are brainwashed to risk everything their lives for a 3-letter alphabet agency. Strangely enough, Victor claimed that he was, well, I say claimed because he's not here right now to back what I'm saying. But Marine, CIA, cryptid, hunter. Years later, 2 years later, after, right before everything went bad for Victor, is when he told me about the installation being under the CIA's farm. Which then it all fell right together. So, yeah, these things, even on a small, isolated peninsula, that yes, at that period of time was woodsy, these things have a knack for finding out or finding a place to be. But it's very interesting that they come spring and fall in that cycle every year for hundreds of years, as far as the locals know. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences, theories, judgment-free. Everyone's simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. And until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. God bless all of us.